Yes. Okay. Uh, yeah, Jill and I tried to figure out a way to get rid of the announcement, but the lawyers at Zoom say it can't be done. So you'll know that you're being recorded in case you didn't know this, and it'll also come on at the end to say the recording stopped. Okay, well, let me jump into the poem. I've been evolving this poem over a number of years, and this is where it's gone now. And I think it will give us a context for both the kind of contemplative practice I'm inviting you to hear, and also just where it goes. How does it develop? All in about I think about 50 words. Uh, you can read the longer version on Wednesday, about 1,000 words. The title of that is called the Sauntering Along the Human Camino, talking about the long journey, which contemplative practice and developing consciousness is a long journey. It's not something you do in a year, or certainly not in a weekend. And it's the journey of a human life, really, to develop your consciousness fully. And so this will give you a glimpse, at least, at my take on this kind of journey that we're on. This is called the tipping point. If you can consent to practice with cheerful perseverance and stay committed to simply dropping your ego mind and all its afflictive emotions down through the body, down onto the altar of the heart, then one fine morning, with no hint of warning, the friend will simply appear at your back door. One heart shining, just like the sun. This whole poem is in the form of an injunction, which goes if then, and it moves around that with what's really at the tipping point, as you'll hear again, is the heart. This kind of spiritual practice and most contemplative practices in most traditions that I know involve moving into the consciousness of the heart. Um, a couple of French monks in a monastery outside of Paris. It was called the Monastery of Saint Victoire or Saint Victor. Hugo and Richard of Saint Victor, they're known as. In the 12th century, they said, hey, this human development, ultimate development to become everything a human can be, involves three eyes: the eye of the body, the eye of the mind, and the eye of the heart. And we progress through these things. And as you move from the eye of the body to the eye of the mind, everything good that you found in the body can be moved along with it. You leave the neurosis behind. And then when you move from the eye of the mind, which are all totally different ways of seeing and behaving in the world, by the way, when you move from the eye of the mind, where the ego mind is, on into the eye of the heart, again, it's cumulative. Nothing's lost that's helpful in the journey. What's left behind, hopefully, is the neurotic, negative, self-limiting stuff See, so this is about that journey, but put in a very short space. A little more about that in the op-ed on Wednesday. But let me read it to you again so you can feel it again. And so, then we'll break it down and point out just a few key words that really um, we turn the lights about this process. If you can consent to practice with cheerful perseverance and stay committed to simply dropping the ego mind and all its afflictive emotions down through the body, down onto the altar of the heart, then one fine morning, with no hint of warning, the friend will simply appear at your back door, one heart, shining just like the sun. So let's sort of break it open a little bit. If you can consent, first part of it is, and if you're here, you've already taken the first step. You consent to come and encounter, and then practice. Because in case you're maybe just absolutely new to this, that's what we're doing here. We're consenting to do a certain spiritual practice, listening to teachings, actually doing the practice of contemplation or meditation, and then coming out and having a community, a conversation about it. That's the practice of heart to heart. We're literally going heart to heart. So to consent to practice and with cheerful perseverance, that's the attitude to take about, buckling up for this long haul. You got to be perseverant and be of good cheer, because a lot of people have done this throughout the ages and have become everything a human being can become. And we have books by them, we have letters by them, we have artwork by them. So you can be cheerful about it, because the journey can be made. You can become all a human being can become. That's the main message I hope you get from our meetings, any of them, is that you can do this. But it'll take cheerful perseverance. You just can't sort of hit or miss it, you know. Uh, and then you have to stay committed to just this, like get this sort of to dropping your ego mind. And the ego mind does a lot of brilliant things. We can, we're communicating now. The ego mind built this computer. The ego mind has done terrific things in our life. But it also it's the part of consciousness that creates what the Buddhists call the afflictive emotions: jealousy, anger, greed, lust, the whole bit, the 7 deadly sins and the 2 we missed, according to the Sufis. We missed deceit. We didn't consider that a deadly sin, a deadly afflictive emotion, and fear. We're not talking about, really, anxiety would be the best thing, because fear is just kind of a natural, but this kind of steady state of anxiety, these are all caused by the ego mind. The ego mind wants something and it doesn't get something. There you go. These aren't naturals. These aren't like transcendent gifts. These are afflictions. And so the line is, and can you stay committed to simply dropping the ego mind and all its afflictive emotions through the body, down, down, through the body, down onto the altar of the heart. That's the simple thing we do. So that's when you're all pissed off, or you're mad as hell, jealous, you're beating yourself up, whatever the afflictive emotion is, when I tell people to sit with it, which sort of unnerves some people, and then they get pissed off at me. Don't tell me just to sit with it. Well, this is what I'm telling you, the only thing you can do. But it's not just sitting there and being in it, it's to drop it through the body. That's why, you have to have a kind of a somatic bodily presence. And the body is the mechanism, the corridor. You go through the body to the heart and lay it on the altar of the heart, whatever it is, fear, anxiety, jealousy, feeling lonely. So it's all okay because it's what you're working with. But where you work with it, if you try to work with it, like we're trying to work with these afflictions of the mind in the mind, is like the Zen guys say, it's like trying to wash off bloody hands with blood. Can't do it. Can't escape the prison of the mind through the mind and the afflictions of the mind. And, we're all innocent victims here. Nobody teaches us this stuff, in formal education, but you're here to learn about it, thank God. In the second half of life, you've had enough of this. How can I deal with it? And that's what the Four Noble Truths in the Buddha, that's what the Beatitudes in Jesus, all the masters teach you. Well, all right, how do we walk with all this? See? So you drop them. That's the point of letting go. Doesn't mean trying to push them away. You're actually taking them into yourself. It's very bold. Drop them down through the body, down onto the altar of the heart. And John Seacrest last week, because I used the image of the altar, turning the dinner table right side up, and he brought up. He said, "Well, that could also be an altar." Well, yeah, it's a very interesting thing. And an altar is a place where healing can happen. And so sometimes that's all you have to do with these afflictive emotions. Let them be right there on the altar of the heart, rather than just leaving them in the mind, rattling around or obsessing about them in the mind. Doesn't work. So that this practice is, unlike a lot of spiritual practices, is ascendancy practice, kind of religion or practice, where you're gazing upward. It's going upward. You're sending prayers up to heaven or whatever the image we were born with. But this is about believing that you have something in yourself, in the inner space of yourself, at the very center of yourself, that can heal it all. Now that's a great if. That's a great experiment. If that's true, let's give it a trust. Find out if it's true. This is really science. Contemplation is really the science. Spirituality, because you say, okay, let's find out. Let's live as if that's true. Okay, so we're to the heart. The heart is the tipping point when you actually get into a practice that involves taking everything to heart. When they say don't take that to heart, common kitchen table wisdom, it flies in the face of this. They mean something else. Maybe they mean don't take it personal or whatever, but everything goes into the heart. Because the heart can take everything. The mind, too much. The mind produced a problem. It's not going to solve it. It's like asking some of these corporate guys who are destroying the planet to save it. It's going to work. We have to get to another energy entirely, you see. And that's the energy of the heart. So then if you could do all that, then one fine morning with no hint of warning, I think of Merton standing on the street corner, March 19th, 1958. That was a fine morning with no hint of warning that before he was doing what every Trappist did still today when they have a doctor's appointment. They don't go to Bardstown for a doctor. They go into Louisville so they can get as far away from the monastery and stay all day. And then Merton was planning to go to his friends, the O'Callaghan's, and drink bourbon and play with their kids and generally have a good meal. And then they would take him back as late as possible. Okay, so he had a break from the monastery. That was the plan. One fine morning with no hint of warning, when he left the doctor, he's in his jeans, he's in his jean jacket, he's incognito, He doesn't look like a monk. He was about to step off the street corner on the corner of Fourth and Walnut at the point, and everything changed. The rest of this poem changed. He saw everybody shining like the sun. Changed Merton's life. Thank God he had 10 more years left to write about it and to go in a totally different direction. It was a tipping point for Merton. And that doesn't happen that grandly for most people, I would say. More likely it happens that you don't even notice it. But all of a sudden, you're not living the life you used to live. But Merton, it does happen that way. It happened that way for Eckhart Tolle. It happened that way for Ramana Maharshi, just that way. One fine morning with no hint of warning, the friend will simply appear. The friend is a classic term for both Sufis and Quakers, because they're and Jesus, really, because Jesus was trying to establish that at the Last Supper, so called. He just said, "Don't call me a master. Don't I'm not a lord, and you're the servants." Or he says, "I'm a friend." That was a real revolution. That was the Holy Thursday Revolution, where he did turn those tables, right? Say up and say, "This is about relationship. This is about friendship. It's not about I'm the Lord." Uh, Changing everybody's idea of God and teacher, student, and all that stuff. He's turning it over there. And so the friend is, the Sufis like that word, and so do the Quakers. And so did Jesus. He said, "Don't call me a master, call me a friend." So one fine morning, with no hint of warning, the friend will simply appear at your back door. Who comes in the back door and who comes in the front door? People know people. They don't have to go through the front door through the living room. They normally come through the back door into the kitchen. That's how most houses are designed, at least in the past. But I think that's what the back door means in this case. The way you don't expect. You expect a kind of Merton moment, the front door. But then the friend comes in. Maybe doesn't even knock. He's your friend. He just walks in, you see. It's beautiful. At your back door, one heart shining like the sun. One heart shining like the sun. That image is for me, I'm writing these things sometimes and I really don't know what they mean. It's what comes out. And then I really sort of read them myself and live with them for a while. I've lived with this poem for some years now. And finally, at that point, you can be one heart. Meister Eckhart said something so interesting. He said, he understands the friend. He said, "The eye with which I see God is the eye with which God sees me." One eye, one eye of the heart. So this duality of, even I, thou, that Buber talks about, it's much better than I, it, treating everybody like an it. Well, I, thou means you could treat everybody like a person, but I relationship is what finally comes, that Eckhart's talking about, that's possible for human beings. So even, you leave God off the hook of being some special it, the friend. So that's a beautiful image of, and then everything can be sort of friendly. Your relationship to the external world and the internal world, to be a friend to your own self, to your own internal mechanism. I'm still not there. I'm still beating myself up. So to be the friend to what's going inside and outside, to where really the division doesn't make any difference, then it's to take a walk and you're walking among your friends there, you see. That is the revolution that is waiting for human beings to see this kind of sense of communion between you and the inner and outer worlds. You don't feel like a stranger to any of it. Is that possible? Yeah. As a matter of fact, that's what the human beings can become. Uh, I wrote a little poem this week talking to a dear friend of mine, actually via internet, and I responded, and just listening to what our exchange was on the internet, I wrote a little poem. I titled it Amicus Brief, because when you make this switch, let's God is something, and then we're trying to connect with it, which is all messed up. I mean, we're never disconnected from the transcendent for even for a nanosecond. Can't it's not possible. But the fact that we have this even an eye out thing with this big eye somewhere that we're wanting to get connected to God. Uh, you know, the religion I grew up into, when I learned Latin as an altar boy, Dominus Vobisco, et cum spiritu tuo. I learned all this stuff, really not knowing the Latin, but you sort of memorize it. But Dominus was one of the words in Latin for God. And Dominus easily gets translated into dominator. And really, we live in that kind of culture still. We're not living in a culture that's run by the heart. We're living in a culture that certain people dominate other people. And it's just from a bad image of God, dominus. So really, this kind of even working with our own relationship with the transcendent, if you see dominus, you see something that is the master, you're the servant, or whatever. It's a dominating kind of concept. Amicus, another nice uh, word. It just means friend. Yeah, and that is really the journey. That was the Holy Thursday Revolution in a nutshell. To treat, to be friendly, to be friendly. Yeah, yeah. So, uh, I think that's good enough. The poem will be there for you tomorrow in the mailing, and we'll sort of shift to meditative mode now, and we'll actually try this stuff out. So let's do that.